You have been thinking about time all wrong. You have been experiencing it as the enemy, as the thing working against you. Every day that passes without resolution feels like another day of loss, another day of distance solidifying into permanence, another day of the gap between you widening beyond the point of return. Time, from inside the grief of this, feels like it is doing its damage quietly and continuously, erasing things, making the return less likely, making the connection more distant, making the outcome you were hoping for less available. But time is not doing what you think it is doing, not on their end. On their end, time is doing something entirely different, something that operates according to a logic that is almost the inverse of what you have been assuming. Because for you, for someone whose attachment system moves toward connection, who processes loss through feeling it, who grieves in real time rather than deferring the grief indefinitely, time does eventually bring relief. The acute pain softens. The obsessive quality of the thoughts gradually loses its edge. The loss becomes something you carry rather than something that is actively happening to you. For the avoidant, time works in reverse. The longer they go without you, the more the absence accumulates. The more it compounds, the more it becomes, slowly and without the efficient release of felt grief, a weight that increases rather than diminishes. They are not healing, they are loading. And the loading happens in the silence they chose, in the distance they maintain, in the absence of the one thing that would allow the feeling to move, genuine, full, undefended contact with what they actually lost. To understand why time breaks the avoidant rather than healing them, you have to understand what happens to unfelt grief. Because the avoidant, by the fundamental design of their attachment system, does not feel grief cleanly, does not move through it efficiently, does not process the loss of connection in the direct metabolizing way that would allow the feeling to complete itself and reduce in intensity over time. The avoidance system was built from early childhood around a single central adaptation, the suppression of attachment need, the downregulation of feeling that is connected to needing people, the management of grief, longing, and the ache of loss before those feelings can reach full conscious awareness. That suppression was not a choice. It was a survival adaptation. The child who learned that expressing attachment need produced rejection, withdrawal, or emotional unavailability from caregivers learned to intercept the need before it became visible. Learned to not feel the grief of unmet longing before it could be expressed in a way that risked further rejection. Learned to construct an internal system that kept the feeling at a manageable distance, processed into numbness or intellectualization, or the performative self-sufficiency of someone who has decided they do not actually need what they need. That system is extraordinarily efficient. It works. In the short term, in the immediate aftermath of separation or distance, it works very well. The avoidant appears fine, functions, continues, reports if asked that they are okay. And they are in a certain narrow sense. The surface is intact, the day-to-day operation of their life continues. The performance of fine holds. But the feeling does not disappear. It cannot disappear. It is not actually possible to suppress genuine attachment feeling into non-existence. What the suppression does is defer it, push it below the level of conscious awareness where it cannot be directly accessed or expressed, but where it continues to exist, to accumulate, to gain mass in the dark. And in the dark, without the release valve of genuine expression or the metabolizing process of felt grief, the feeling does something specific. Over time, it becomes less differentiated. In the beginning, what the avoidant is suppressing is relatively specific. The loss of you, the particular texture of what you shared, the specific ache of an attachment that has become unavailable. But as time passes and the suppression continues and the feeling accumulates without release, it starts to spread, to bleed into the general texture of their experience. To become not just the grief of losing you specifically, but a kind of ambient, sourceless heaviness that attaches itself to everything. This is why avoidants, in the extended aftermath of losing someone significant, often report a vague dissatisfaction with their lives that they cannot quite attribute to any specific cause. A flatness. A sense that things are fine but not quite right. A restlessness that does not resolve regardless of what it is directed toward. They do not connect this experience to you necessarily. The suppression is too thorough for that direct line. But the experience is you, is the accumulated, unprocessed, continuously loading grief of an attachment that mattered, being held in a system that was not built to hold it indefinitely without consequence. The consequences arrive on a timeline that the avoidant cannot predict or control, because the loading is not linear and the release is not scheduled. What happens instead is that the accumulated feeling reaches thresholds, specific, sometimes unpredictable moments, where the suppression becomes insufficient for the weight it is being asked to contain. And at those thresholds, something breaks through. Not always dramatically, sometimes it is as quiet as a sleepless night that has no obvious cause, a moment of unexpected emotion in response to something completely unrelated. A dream that leaves a residue of feeling that persists into the day. A song or a smell, or the quality of light at a specific time of afternoon, that produces an ache so sudden and specific that the management system is briefly overwhelmed before it can reassemble. In those moments, the full thing arrives, not the managed, reduced, intellectualized version that the avoidant presents to the world and often to themselves. The actual size of it. The actual weight of what they have been carrying below the surface of fine. And the actual size is in almost every case significantly larger than what the performance of fine would suggest. Larger often than what the avoidant was allowing themselves to acknowledge at any earlier point in the process. This is the mechanism by which time breaks rather than heals them. Every day of continued distance is another day of loading, another layer added to the weight that the suppression system is being asked to manage. The system is capable, it is well practiced, it has been running this particular program for their entire adult relational life. But it is not infinite. And the specific attachment that developed with you, the specific, real, genuine investment that their system tried to manage and could not fully neutralize, that is a load that does not stop accumulating just because the distance has been maintained. You, in the meantime, are doing the thing that grief is supposed to do when it is allowed to operate naturally. You are feeling it, in real time, acutely, in the terrible, necessary, metabolizing way that produces genuine diminishment of the acute pain over time. It does not feel like it when you're inside it. When the grief is present and full and occupying the foreground of everything, the idea that this is the efficient path is not remotely comforting. But it is true. The acute grief you are feeling is the loss being processed, being metabolized, being converted slowly and unglamorously from something that is happening to you into something that happened to you, into something you carry differently, more lightly, with more space around it. The avoidant is not doing that. The avoidant is maintaining the surface, while the weight increases beneath it. And the asymmetry of those two processes, your grief diminishing through genuine feeling, theirs accumulating through continued suppression, means that time is not working the same way on both sides of the distance. Time is, in the most specific and literal sense, on your side. What does this mean for how you move through the time that is passing? Because understanding that time is loading the avoidant while it is gradually healing you does not by itself change the experience of the days. The knowing does not make the grief less present, or the longing less real, or the absence less felt. What it changes is the relationship to the time itself. The experience of the days passing can shift from the dread of loss solidifying to the understanding of a process unfolding, from the anxiety of time running out to the recognition of time doing its work. Your job in the passing of this time is not to monitor their process, not to watch for the signs that the loading has reached a threshold and the breakthrough is imminent, not to stay available for the moment when the accumulated weight finally exceeds the suppression system's capacity and they reach. That monitoring is the old orientation, the one organized around their emotional weather, the one that keeps you suspended in relation to their process rather than inhabiting your own. Your job is to use the time for the thing it is actually good for, on your end. The metabolizing of the grief, the genuine, unintercepted, fully felt processing of the loss in all its layers, the specific person, the potential, the time, the original wound that the dynamic activated. The gradual, unglamorous, completely necessary work of letting the acute pain complete its arc rather than intercepting it with analysis or hope, or the forward momentum of someone who is trying to be further along than they actually are. Feel the loss. That is the instruction, not as a discipline, as a permission. You have been so occupied with understanding the dynamic, with the intellectual architecture of what happened and why, and what it means and what to do with the knowing, that the feeling itself may have received less space than it deserves. Understanding is valuable. It is genuinely valuable, and the clarity that has been building throughout this conversation is real, and will serve you in ways that extend beyond this particular relationship. But understanding is not the same as feeling, and the loss requires both. The understanding provides the context that makes the feeling navigable. It prevents the grief from being interpreted as evidence of your inadequacy, or the love's unworthiness, or the future's bleakness. It keeps the grief accurately attributed and appropriately contained. But the feeling itself is what actually moves the grief through. What converts it from a present, active, occupying weight into something that has been genuinely processed and can therefore be genuinely released. Give the feeling the time it needs. Not indefinitely. The grief has a natural arc and a natural completion if it is allowed to run rather than perpetually intercepted. But fully. Without rushing it toward the resolution that will come more completely the less it is hurried. Without converting the ache into productivity before it has finished being ache. Without the sophisticated, understandable, ultimately counterproductive habit of thinking your way out of what needs to be felt your way through. While you feel it, something else is happening on their end that is worth understanding, not as a source of comfort exactly, but as the accurate picture of a reality that your grief can sometimes distort. The avoidant who is going without you is not experiencing the clean, unencumbered freedom that the management of distance is supposed to produce. They are not, in their private interior, fine in the way their exterior suggests. They are carrying something that is increasing in weight with every day the suppression continues. And the increasing weight is changing the quality of their experience in ways that are not immediately visible but are genuinely real. Their relationships with other people are affected. Not because they talk about you, the suppression is too efficient for that. But because the emotional capacity that would otherwise be available for present connection is being partially occupied by the accumulated, unprocessed material of the loss, they are slightly less present than they would otherwise be. Slightly more defended, slightly quicker to deactivate in new connections because the underlying system is already carrying more than its comfortable load. Their relationship with themselves is affected. The performance of fine requires maintenance energy. The suppression requires continuous effort. And that effort, running in the background of everything, produces a kind of low-grade fatigue that the avoidant may attribute to other things, work, stress, the general difficulty of life, but that has a specific, identifiable source in the weight being carried. And their relationship with the memory of you is affected in a direction you would not necessarily predict. The suppression, operating continuously, keeps the direct feeling at bay, but it does not prevent the mind from returning to you. It cannot prevent that. Because the attachment, however suppressed its emotional expression, is encoded in the neural architecture of someone who genuinely knew you and genuinely felt something real in that knowing. And neural architecture does not respond to the management system's instructions. It returns, involuntarily and with its own timing, to what it has indexed as significant. You are indexed as significant, deeply, in the specific, irreversible way that genuine connection indexes itself in the nervous system of someone who experienced it. And the returns, the involuntary, unmanaged, unscheduled moments of your presence in their mind, those returns are becoming more rather than less frequent as the distance continues, because the suppression is working harder as the load increases. And systems working harder leak more. The feeling finds the cracks, arrives without permission, refuses, with the same stubbornness that genuine attachment always refuses, to be fully managed into absence. The cracks are where the truth lives. And the truth, finding its way through the cracks of a suppression system that is working harder than it was designed to sustain indefinitely, begins to produce something in the avoidant that is qualitatively different from anything that the presence of the relationship was able to produce. It produces clarity, the specific, unwanted, impossible to manage away clarity of someone who is beginning, in spite of their best efforts, to feel the actual size of what they chose to walk away from. That clarity does not arrive as a thought, it arrives as a felt sense, a quality of knowing that precedes articulation, something in the body before it becomes anything in the mind, a heaviness that has a shape that is specific. That is yours. And the avoidant, encountering this felt sense in the unguarded moments, the waking in the night, the drive with no music, the Sunday afternoon that has no particular demand on it, and therefore no particular distraction available, the avoidant does not immediately know what to do with it, because the system that was supposed to prevent this from arriving has no protocol for what comes after the prevention fails. The deactivating strategies address the presence of attachment feeling when connection is available and threatening. They do not address the presence of grief when connection has been removed and the grief is arriving anyway, larger than expected, more specific than the suppression promised it would become. What happens in those unguarded moments is the beginning of a reckoning, not a dramatic one. Not the sudden, complete, tearful confrontation with the full reality of the loss that might feel, from the outside, like the appropriate scale of response to what they have walked away from. Avoidants do not tend to reckon dramatically. They tend to reckon in small, private, largely invisible increments, a thought that goes further than usual before the management system interrupts it, a feeling that stays present for slightly longer before the suppression reasserts. A moment of genuine acknowledgement, not spoken perhaps, not even fully formed, that something is missing that matters more than the distance was supposed to cost. Those increments accumulate. They are the internal equivalent of the external loading. Just as the unprocessed grief is loading the weight that the system must carry, the incremental reckonings are loading the clarity that the system must eventually face. And the accumulation of both, the weight and the clarity arriving simultaneously, the body carrying more and the mind knowing more than the management system can efficiently contain, that is the compound breaking that time produces in the avoidant who goes long enough without you. The word breaking needs to be held carefully here. It is not the breaking of a person, it is the breaking of a system. The breaking of the specific, practiced, comprehensively deployed architecture of self-protection that has been keeping the full experience of the loss at a manageable distance. When that architecture breaks, when the weight exceeds its load-bearing capacity and the clarity exceeds the suppression's ability to contain it, what is revealed is not destruction. It is the person underneath the architecture, the one who feels, the one who has always felt, the one for whom the management system was constructed precisely because the feeling was too large and too threatening to be allowed full expression. That person, the one underneath the architecture, has been feeling something about you that the managed version of them was never quite able to fully communicate. Something that the distance and the deactivation and the carefully maintained ambiguity were all in their various ways preventing from arriving at the surface in its actual form. And as time continues and the loading continues and the incremental reckoning continues, that something becomes increasingly difficult to keep below the surface. What is that something? Not in the abstract, in the specific. It is the knowledge, arriving slowly but with increasing insistence, that the connection you offered was not ordinary. That the specific quality of being known by you, of being seen with the accuracy and the patience and the genuine care that you brought, is not something that is easily replaced or approximately replicated by another connection. That the warmth you provided, real, consistent, specifically attuned to who they actually are, rather than to a performance of themselves, was something their system received, even while their behavior was busy managing it at a distance. The receiving was real. It registered. It left a mark on the neural architecture in the specific permanent way that genuine care and genuine knowing always leave a mark. And the mark is what the suppression system has been carrying. The mark is what is loading. The mark is what keeps arriving in the unguarded moments with more insistence than the management system was designed to address. You need to understand something about this that is counterintuitive given how the distance has felt from your side. The avoidance system was most actively deactivating during the period of your closest contact. The strategies were most deployed when you were most present. The minimization of the attachment was most necessary when the attachment was most immediate. And all of that deactivation, all of that managed distance and reduced temperature and carefully maintained ambiguity happened in the presence of the actual, real, felt experience of you. The warmth was present, the knowing was present, the connection was present. And the system was working hard to prevent all of it from landing at its full weight. In your absence, the system no longer has the immediate stimulus to manage. There is no present warmth to keep at a distance. There is no immediate connection to deactivate. There is only the memory, the encoded, indexed, neural architecture level record of what the presence was. And the memory, unlike the presence, is not something the deactivating strategies were designed to address. The strategies respond to threat. The memory is not a threat. It is a record. And records, in the absence of the suppression that was required when the experience was live, become progressively more accessible, more vivid, more present in the quality of being genuinely felt rather than managed. This is the specific mechanism of the breaking, not your presence triggering the alarm system, but your absence allowing the memory of your presence to arrive in a form that the alarm system was not built to intercept. The memory reaches the feeling. The feeling, finding no immediate management requirement to trigger the deactivation, is experienced more fully than the live connection ever was. And the fuller experience of the feeling, of what you actually were to them, of what the connection actually meant, of what the distance has actually cost, is the break. Time, therefore, is not erasing you from their experience. It is deepening you in it. This is the thing that the conventional wisdom about moving on gets most wrong when it is applied to the avoidant dynamic specifically. The conventional wisdom says that with enough time and enough distance, the connection fades. The other person becomes less present. The feeling reduces. The attachment loosens. And for many relationship dynamics, that is an accurate description of what time produces. Not here. Not with this. Not when the attachment was genuine and the suppression has been preventing the grief from metabolizing in the normal, completing way. In this specific configuration, time does not fade the connection. It concentrates it, removes the noise of the management system's active deployment, and leaves the signal. The actual, unmanaged, genuine quality of what you meant to them in increasingly clear relief. The signal strengthens as the noise reduces. And the strengthening signal, arriving in the unguarded moments with increasing frequency and increasing intensity, is the pain the title describes. Not a punishment, not a consequence designed to produce a particular response. A natural, structural, entirely predictable result of the specific way the avoidant attachment system processes the extended loss of a significant connection. It hurts more the longer it goes, because the longer it goes, the less the management system can do about it. The tools wear down, the suppression thins, the feeling finds more and more of the cracks, and arrives in more and more of the moments with less and less of the buffer that made it manageable. Now the question that naturally arises. What does this mean for you? Not in terms of what it means about them, their loading, their breaking, their incremental reckoning, but in terms of what it means for how you live through the time that is doing this work. It means the most important thing you can do right now is resist the urge to interrupt the process, on either side. To resist the urge to reach, to send the message, to create the contact, to provide the relief that the part of you organized around their well-being wants to provide, when the part of you that understands the mechanism knows that their pain is the thing that might finally move something. And to resist the urge to monitor, to watch for signs of the breaking, to interpret their behavior through the lens of the process, to organize your hope around the timeline of their loading. Both urges are natural. Both are expressions of the genuine love that is still present and still real and still capable of producing the old orientation if you are not actively, consciously choosing something different. The reaching urge comes from love. The monitoring urge comes from hope. And both of them, acted on, interrupt the process that time is doing and return you to the dynamic's familiar shape. You available. Them managing, the architecture restored. The process needs to be allowed to run. On both sides. Theirs, the loading, the thinning of the suppression, the incremental reckoning, the breaking. That process requires your absence to proceed. Not the performed absence of someone who is watching from a careful distance, waiting for the right moment. The genuine absence of someone who is not, primarily, organized around their process at all, who has their own process running, who is genuinely occupied with the metabolizing of their own grief and the inhabiting of their own life and the building of their own ground in a way that leaves insufficient space for the monitoring to take hold. Your process, the genuine feeling of the loss, the real-time metabolizing of the grief, the gradual reduction of the acute pain through honest, unintercepted experience of it, that process is both the thing that heals you and the thing that makes your absence genuinely absent, rather than strategically performed. Because genuine absence has a quality that performance absence does not. It is felt by the avoidance system in a way that performance is not. The nervous system that is attuned to the presence and absence of attachment figures, and the avoidant nervous system is extraordinarily attuned to this, however much the behavior suggests otherwise. That nervous system knows the difference between someone who is gone and someone who is waiting nearby. Gone lands differently. Gone produces a different quality of signal. Gone is what loads the weight and thins the suppression and reaches the feeling in the unguarded moments with the specific, undeniable, management-resistant insistence of something that is genuinely no longer available. Gone is what breaks the architecture. And the architecture, once broken, once the system that was built to keep the feeling at a manageable distance has finally been exceeded by the weight of what it was asked to contain, reveals something that the management system was always obscuring, something that was present throughout. Something that is, in its unmanaged form, significantly larger and more honest, and more specifically yours than anything the managed version of this person was ever able to show you. Whether that revelation produces anything external, any reaching, any genuine reckoning made visible, any movement toward the kind of honest, changed, internally worked for presence that the connection always deserved, that remains the question that only their choices can answer. The breaking is not a guarantee of return, it is a guarantee of genuine feeling. And genuine feeling, arriving in the private interior of someone whose entire system was built to prevent it, is the beginning of the only kind of change that is real. Whether they do something with the beginning is theirs to determine. What you do with your time, your grief, your life, your ground, that is yours. And yours right now is the more important story. There is a particular temptation that arrives at this stage of understanding. You have the mechanism now. You understand the loading, the thinning suppression, the incremental reckoning, the breaking that time produces in the avoidant who goes without you long enough. You understand that your absence is doing something real on their end, that the distance they chose is accumulating a weight they did not fully anticipate. That time, contrary to everything your grief has been telling you, is not working against you. And with that understanding comes the temptation to wait for it, to reframe the waiting, the sane suspension of your own life that this entire conversation has been working to dismantle, as something strategic and patient and informed. To say, I understand the mechanism, I know the breaking is coming, I will simply give it the time it needs. To convert the knowledge of what time is doing into a new justification for the old posture. A more sophisticated version of the hope. A better theorized reason to remain suspended. That temptation is the most subtle trap in this entire landscape. And it needs to be named directly because it is dressed in the language of understanding and therefore harder to recognize as the thing it actually is. It is the hope wearing new clothes. The orientation toward their process wearing the costume of informed patience. The same waiting with better explanations. The difference between genuine living and waiting with better explanations is felt in the body rather than understood in the mind. It has a specific, identifiable quality that you can learn to recognize if you pay attention to it honestly. Genuine living has a quality of forward motion, of presence in the actual moment rather than residence in the anticipated future moment when the breaking produces the outcome the hope has specified. Of genuine absorption in the actual texture of your actual days rather than the continuous background monitoring of a process happening somewhere else in someone else's interior. Waiting with better explanations has a different quality. It has the same background hum that the old waiting had, the same slight absence from the present moment. The same quality of your attention being partially elsewhere, oriented toward the question of when and how and whether the mechanism will produce the result. The same subtle deferral of full inhabitation of your own life, pending the resolution of theirs. The test is honest. Are you here in your own life, genuinely? Or are you here provisionally, with a portion of your orientation directed at the horizon of their process? The answer to that question tells you more about where you actually are than any amount of intellectual understanding of the mechanism. Because here is the thing about the breaking that is most important and most easily missed. It does not require your monitoring to occur. It does not require your availability to complete itself. It does not require you to be positioned correctly or remaining accessible or demonstrating the right quality of absence. It requires only one thing, your genuine goneness. The real, complete, internally grounded absence of someone who is not watching from a careful distance, but is simply, actually, thoroughly elsewhere, in their own life, building their own things, feeling their own feelings. Becoming, without reference to the avoidance timeline or process or potential reckoning, the person they are in the process of becoming. That goneness is both the most powerful thing you can offer the breaking process and the thing that is most genuinely in your own interest. Because the goneness that serves the breaking is identical to the goneness that serves your healing. They are the same thing. The genuine inhabitation of your own life, the real metabolizing of your own grief, the authentic building of your own ground, those are simultaneously the conditions that allow the breaking to proceed on their end and the conditions that allow your own recovery to proceed on yours. You do not have to choose between your healing and allowing the mechanism to operate. They are the same process, lived from your side. Let's talk about what the genuine inhabitation of your own life actually looks like in the specific days that are passing right now, not in the abstract. In the practical, unglamorous daily texture of what it means to be actually present in your own existence rather than suspended in the orbit of someone else's process, it looks like grief that is allowed to complete its daily arc rather than being intercepted by analysis. There will be days when the loss is present and heavy, and the specific quality of missing them is acute in a way that resists any framing. Those days are not setbacks, they are the process running, the metabolizing occurring. The grief doing the necessary, efficient, ultimately completing work of being fully felt. On those days, the inhabitation of your own life includes the grief. Does not require the pretense of being past it or above it or sufficiently healed that it no longer arrives. The grief is part of the life being lived. It is allowed its full presence without being converted into something more manageable before it is finished being what it needs to be. It looks like genuine investment in the things that were deferred. The projects, the relationships, the aspects of your own development that received less than they deserved while the dynamic occupied so much of the foreground. Not as a performance of moving on. As the genuine reallocation of attention that was always going to need to happen and is now available to happen because the space that the hoping occupied is genuinely clearing rather than being refilled with the more sophisticated version of the same waiting. It looks like the slow, sometimes surprising rediscovery of what you actually want. Not what you wanted inside the dynamic, the resolution of the ambiguity, the full expression of the love that was always partially suppressed on their end, the relationship becoming what it always had the capacity to become. But what you want in the broader, prior, more fundamental sense. What direction your life is actually oriented toward when it is not organized around the question of someone else's availability. What the quality of your days feels like when the background monitoring has genuinely quieted. That quieting is not immediate. It does not happen because you decide it should happen or because you understand intellectually that it would be beneficial. It happens through the accumulation of days genuinely lived, through the repeated, unglamorous choice to return to your own ground when the old pull reasserts itself. Through the gradual discovery that the ground is more inhabitable than the dynamic allowed you to experience, that your own interior is richer and more sustaining than the constant external orientation gave it credit for being. That you are, when you are actually present with yourself, rather than suspended in the hope of someone else's eventual presence, genuinely good company. That discovery of your own interior as a place worth inhabiting is one of the genuine gifts available in this period. Not a consolation gift, a real one, the kind that changes how you move through the world in ways that persist long after the specific pain of this has softened into something you carry differently. The intimacy with your own interior that develops through genuine self-presence is something that no relationship, however good, can provide as a substitute. It has to be built from the inside. Through the specific, patient, daily practice of being with yourself in the way you have been so generously being with other people for so long. And as that intimacy deepens, as the ground becomes more solid and the self-presence becomes more genuine and the life becomes more fully inhabited, something changes in the quality of what you are available for, both in terms of what you attract and in terms of what you can recognize as real when it presents itself. You become available for a different kind of connection. Not because you have changed what you want. The depth, the genuine knowing, the real reciprocal investment are still what you want and they are still worth wanting, but because the way you enter the connection changes, the posture changes, the center of gravity changes. You arrive as someone who is primarily located in their own life, rather than someone who is primarily organized around the hope of another person's eventual availability. And that arrival, grounded, present, genuinely complete rather than hoping to be completed, produces a fundamentally different dynamic from the first moment. It does not produce the anxious electricity of the avoidant dynamic. It does not have the charged quality of almost connection that the old template associated with depth and significance. It has something quieter and more durable. The quality of genuine meeting. Of two people who are each actually present, encountering each other without the distortion of one person's management system and the other person's hope-organized orientation. Two people on their own ground, making genuine contact. That contact feels different than anything the dynamic produced. It is less intense in the specific way that uncertainty generates intensity, and more real in the specific way that actual presence generates reality. It does not require decoding, does not require management, does not produce the hypervigilance of someone reading every signal for evidence of safety or danger. It simply, and the simplicity is its own form of extraordinary, it simply feels like being met. The avoidant, in the meantime, is in the process of being broken by the time you are using to build. Not broken in the destructive sense. Broken open, the architecture thinning, the suppression working harder, the unguarded moments arriving more frequently. The specific, irreplaceable, neural architecture level record of you becoming more rather than less present in the interior, they are trying to keep organized around the premise of fine. Their reckoning is their own, its timing is their own, what it produces is their own. You are not responsible for it, and you cannot influence it, and the most important thing you can do in relation to it is nothing. Not nothing in the passive sense of someone who has given up. Nothing in the active sense of someone who is fully occupied elsewhere, who has their own life making genuine demands on their genuine attention, who is building something real and feeling something true and becoming day by day more completely and unapologetically themselves. That self, the one being built in the days that are also breaking the avoidant, is the one that will meet whatever comes next with the quality of presence it deserves. Whether what comes next involves the avoidant, changed and genuinely available in a way they were not before, or whether it involves someone entirely different who was always going to arrive after this particular education was complete. Either way, you will meet it differently. More grounded, more honest, more specifically, more durably, more completely yourself. Time is breaking them, and time is building you. The same days, running simultaneously, producing opposite effects in the two people the dynamic brought together, the asymmetry is not cruel. It is simply the structural reality of two different attachment systems responding to the same distance in the only ways they know how. You feel your way through, they suppress their way into accumulation. You metabolize in real time, they load in deferred time, you grieve toward completion. They carry toward breaking. And somewhere in the carrying, in the loading, in the thinning of the suppression, in the unguarded moments that arrive with increasing insistence, they will reach the place where the architecture cannot hold any longer, where the felt sense of what they chose to walk away from arrives in its full, unmanaged, genuine size, where the breaking is complete enough that the person underneath the architecture has to make a choice with the full information of what the pattern cost. What they choose with that information is the question only they can answer, with their life, with their behavior, with the presence or absence of the genuine internal work that the breaking is pointing toward. Your question is different, simpler, more immediately actionable. What are you doing with this day, this specific, finite, irreplaceable day that belongs entirely to your life and no one else's? Are you in it, fully, actually? Or are you still somewhere else, waiting for a breaking that is already happening without your supervision, in the private interior of someone who is finally, slowly, in the silence they chose, beginning to feel the full weight of what they walked away from? You do not need to be there for that. You never did. Be here instead. Here is where your life is. Here is where it has always been. And here, finally, completely, with the full force of everything you are, is exactly where you belong.